This podcast is brought to you by Steede Motor Group, Claregalway. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, find out more at steedemotorgroup.ie. So you're welcome now to part one on the football podcast this week. Part one now, I'm joined by Sean O'Depere and Eddie O'Sullivan to look at the senior final between Moycullen and Corofin on Sunday at 2 o'clock. And then in part two, we'll be joined by Brian Roache and Johnny Ryan to look at the intermediate final between Kilconly and Monivea-Abbey. Just before we get into look at the final, Sean, just on your own club on Caharua, a lot of people this year found it as a shock that on Caharua in the space of 2 years have went from senior to junior. Did it come as a surprise to you?
It's hard to answer that, because I've been, I suppose, living in and settled in Oranmore for the last 20 years. So I won't say that I've lost touch with Caharua, not at all. But you're not on the ground there. You're not nipping down to training to see what standards are like. I did manage to get to a couple of games this year. I saw a couple of group games that they had, and they were struggling. My guess is that the average age of the Carrow squad would have been high enough. There was, I think, at one point, and I'm retired, I'd say about 15, 16 years, there was about 6 or 7 fellas on the pitch at one stage that I had actually played with. So it just goes to show, that the average age was I would say, higher than normal. Also, there's a lot of fellas, I think, well, what I've been told, that are actually, who would be good players in their mid-20s, they're actually abroad on one of these, these kind of year or two gap years, they call them. So, they were sorely missed. So really, it didn't come as a shock to me. And I was at their last game against Kilconly, a game that they had to win in Headford. It didn't come as a shock to me that, that Carrow got relegated. That said, it wasn't through any lack of commitment or lack of effort on behalf of any of the players or any of the management. They're fantastic people. And I suppose, with the initial disappointment of getting relegated, maybe after a few days, there is, to a certain extent, a silver lining, in the sense that there's a nice crop of young players, so I'm told, coming through in Carrow, and maybe junior level is maybe where they might get a slightly easier introduction to adult football. So look, it's not easy, but I suppose Carrow had a long time. They played at the kind of, I suppose, the top end of club football in Galway. So things go in cycles. So hopefully they'll come up again in the near future.
Eddie, just on the senior relegation over the weekend, it's safe to say it's got fierce interest in now after the weekend. Killannon and Letchamore drawn, puts Nivana Letchamore now in a great position at survival, because ultimately we're at this game now coming up at the weekend, Killannon and St. Michael's, winner takes all. Are you surprised by this?
Part of me is surprised, I suppose, but part of me isn't overly surprised, because the one thing I'd say about Letchamore is, like, they do have quite a good forward line. I perceive to be a good forward line, and like they're always able to give a good performance, especially as the season wears on. They tend to actually get better. So there was always going to be one big game in them, and as it turned out, there was two. They took Michael's and they drew with Killannon. I suppose possibly Michael's might be suffering a bit of a hangover from nearly getting to the quarterfinal, and then with, I suppose, all the appeals and whatever, possibly weren't so focused on what they needed to be on, survival essentially. Whereas I suppose the other clubs were, they knew from weeks out that they had to produce something. So it's going to be winner takes all themselves in Killannon, and Letchamore look like, if they get anything from the Spiddle game, they're safe. So it would be a surprise from the point of view if Clannon or Michaels do go down. Well, it would have been at the outset, but I suppose we always had to consider at the start, Letchmore, there was always going to be a bite in them as such. It's a pity to see Spiddle probably suffering with Finian gone back to Australia. Spiddle for a few years they were in senior, I thought were very good and very competitive. Very hard bet. Just it's fallen away a bit, I suppose, this year, which it easily can happen for any smaller club.
Sets it up lovely for the weekend now, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm considering going out to that now because it'll be some battle. Like you imagine, Michaels, there'll be something in Michaels because they actually on paper they have a decent team. There has to be a big bite in them. And Clannon can produce a performance against anyone when they get going. So
yeah, that's one to really look forward to this weekend. That's the final round of the relegation round robin series. So we'll have two teams then relegated who finish third and fourth to intermediate for 2024. Then first and second in that group will remain safe and retain their senior status for 2024. But it's the main event this weekend. It's Corofin and Moycullen in Paor Stadium on Sunday. From the outset, Sean, a lot of people were looking at these two teams to be in a county final.
Yeah, well, certainly Moycullen, they're a fantastic team. They have some very, very good players, and they've timed their run, I suppose, nicely in the sense that we'll say the likes of Peter Cook, he didn't appear, I don't think, until really the quarterfinals. Sean Kelly, we didn't really see him in the earlier rounds. He had spent some of the summer in Boston. So and it also gave a chance to, we'll say, a couple of their, Johnny Maloney from Offaly to settle in as well. But yeah, I think at the start of the year, if you were to pick the team most likely to win the county title, you would have picked Moycullen. I suppose with Corofin, the big question mark was, we'll say, these new young lads that they brought on stream this year. They've probably, had to bring them on a bit quicker than Corofin would normally do. You have to serve, in years gone by, because their team was so brilliant, you had to serve an apprenticeship of sorts before you broke onto the senior team. But that's for me the most interesting part of this, would say, final. How are these young lads? And they're fantastic players. They've played for Galway under-20s this year. When they probably should have beaten Sligo down in Tuam there last April. But there was, I think, 4 of this Corofin panel. 3 of them were starting on the Galway team. So, they have a lot of quality, even though it's very young, and you're up against a kind of a more seasoned team in Moycullen. But certainly, I'd give Corofin, and I suppose it would be to a certain extent an upset if they won. Looking at Paddy Paor there, Moycullen are strong favourites, but I'd give Corofin a real chance.
Just on Moycullen, I was putting the question to Boris Brosnan last week on the podcast. Eddie, do you think for this Moycullen group to be considered a great team, they want to beat Corofin in a county final?
I'd say for them maybe a big statement to beat Corofin in a county final. But I would also say that they're probably not looking past Sunday, but at the same time I do know that they have ambitions, and probably it doesn't just stop at Connacht. I'd say they want to see the whole way through, but they'd be very foolish to look past Sunday, because as good as they are and they have an excellent 15, Corofin winning county finals. And tradition is the type of thing. When I was younger, I thought tradition didn't matter anything. It's all about players in the pitch. But tradition, the older I get, the more tradition does matter in these situations. And Sean's right about, I suppose, some of the younger Corofin players. And I was discussing this with you previously, Paul. Corofin have plenty off the bench to call upon as well. Plenty of experience, no more than Moycullen. But I'd say, yeah, Moycullen, it'd be a big statement now to beat Corofin in a county final. It'd be a real statement of we're now the big dogs in the yard.
Just to bring both of you in here, we talk about the Corofin younger players, but there's been Corofin experienced players like Micheál Lundy and Mike Farrer making an impact. Do you think we could see some of these more experienced players from the start now on Sunday, or do you think they're pretty much going to stick with what they've had so far?
Is this me, Paul? Is it?
Yeah, you can jump in there.
Okay. Well, no, I think Kevin Johnson will stick to we'll say more or less the team that he's played up to now, where you have the likes of Micheál Lundy, you have we'll say Mike Farrer, these type of guys coming off the bench to kind of, I suppose, what do they call them now? Finishers, to finish out the game. I think he'll stick with that kind of formula. I do the odd time bump into Kevin Johnson as we're buying our coffees before we go into first class in the morning, and I did bump into him there.
Is that a cappuccino, Sean? Is it?
No, it's an Americano.
So nice and simple, Sean.
Huh?
Keep it nice and simple.
Yeah, Americano. I think Kevin had something more complicated, but no, obviously we fall into conversation about football, and the one thing he did say was that, and he wouldn't, obviously he wouldn't be telling any secrets, but that. And this was about maybe 3 weeks ago before they got to a semi-final. But for the first time, we'd say this particular year, that we'd say, some of the older lads had injury issues earlier on in the year. So they were now injury clear. They were chomping at the bit on the bench. And you had the young lads out on the pitch on the starting 15. So that's a wonderful kind of a situation to be in as a manager. I was just looking back there at the lineup that played Kilconly in the 2020 All-Ireland final, where they beat them after extra time. And of the guys that took to the park in the semi-final against Milltown, whether this was starting or coming on as a sub, you had 11 players that played that day in Croke Park. So that's just huge, huge experience. To be bringing into a county final on Sunday, and obviously, Moycullen are favourites. But when have we ever, seen a Corofin team who are underdogs in a county final? I don't think we've ever seen it. So, to answer your original question, no. I think he'll start the young lads, the Patrick Egan's, the Goggers, the Cohens, and the McCabe's, and he will then bring in the experienced heads at some point in the second half.
To build on that, Paul, if I was a manager, I couldn't see why you disrupt that unless you had real doubts that you could be in the game coming down the home straight. If you have any confidence in going with the younger lads, that they'll be in with a chance of winning coming down the home straight, it makes great sense to start with him and have the cavalry come on then. And as in Micheál Lundy, Mike Farrer, they'll have a lot more of a wherewithal to impact a close game coming down the last 15 minutes than a younger chap who, could be overawed by the situation, may not be, but maybe. Whereas, you can always spring them from the bench a bit earlier, but you can't really rely on a younger club to impact last 15 minutes of such a big game. It may or may not happen. So, if I was in his shoes, I'd be inclined to do something similar. Go with what you have and then work back from there.
On Moycullen, Eddie, before we get into matchups and looking at the game and the overall setup, Micheál O'Reilly came in the last day, huge impact. Niall Walsh has struggled with injury, but seems to be coming back to full fitness. He's scored something like 310 from play throughout the championship. Jared Davern hasn't. We're still unsure whether he'll be available or not, given what's happened there. But do you see them sticking the same, or do you see them making one or two adjustments this weekend?
I see them sticking the same, yeah. And it'll be probably Neil Walsh and Micheál O'Reilly off the bench will be their go-to. And obviously Jared Averin if he becomes available as well. But I can't see Don Connellan be he'd be a man that would stick with the 15 now going into the final. I can't see him switching that now and relying on Micheál to make the impact. I suppose the Micheál O'Reilly he'd be a very he's a very unique footballer, but he makes hard runs like a centre in rugby, and just he'll pierce holes in your defence, which is hard to deal with, but it's probably more effective as the game gets a bit more fragmented in the second half. And especially when you've such an embarrassment of riches in your first 15, like you may as well pick the team accordingly.
On Corofin, Sean, they're coming up this weekend against a system that a lot of clubs around Galway have struggled to break down. David Wynne has sat back at times, Johnny Maloney has sat back at times, and teams struggled to break this system down. We've seen Montbellew the last day, they did try and force things, but that Moycullen system really did frustrate them. Corofin, even the last day against Milltown, when this kick passes on, they love to kick it on, but you just feel like there's not going to be a lot of opportunities that this kick pass is going to be on Sunday.
Yeah, and like that's, some of the best football that we've seen Corofin play involves this, beautiful, accurate, long kick pass. But what I will say is that would say behind Kevin Johnson, you have, and he is there in the background, Dave Morris, right? So they know what they're coming up against in terms of the system that Moycullen employ. I don't think it'll be, a very open game on Sunday. One kind of interesting stat, and I know, stats, you can only rely on them so much, but, even though you do say that, Moycullen have this system that opposition find difficult to deal with, like they have conceded 761. And they both played the same amount of championship matches, which is 7 each, right? So they've conceded 761, right? But what sticks out for me is that Corofin, with the same number of games played, have only conceded 444, right? Now, there's a big difference there. So whilst we, give Moycullen credit for the way they set themselves up, I think Corofin are going to be fairly cagey on Sunday, and I think it'll be a very tactical, I suppose, not very, it won't be a free flowing game, and it'll be a very cagey affair. And I think Corofin will come with a very sort of defined game plan. They might try and draw Moycullen out of whatever defensive setup they have. And you'll have Gary Sice in there directing traffic. He's a very good on-field general to be able to read things. So it's just something else that Corofin will have to deal with if they are going to overcome Moycullen.
How do we see Moycullen tying up against the Corofin forwards this weekend, Eddie?
It's against the Corofin forwards. It's I suppose it depends on whether Dylan Kennedy comes back in there or not. But I'd imagine it possibly they might just do Mulcahy, I'd say, on site. Just blank him out of the game. You sacrifice yourself if needs be. Outside of that, I wouldn't be too sure. It might be just a case of we line out as we are. I'd say that'd be the big matchup they'll be thinking there. Because Moycullen probably would have a certain level of, we need our lads run up the pitch and scoring for us and creating scores that we don't want, they probably don't want to be sacrificing Dave Wynne to someone in particular. So I'd imagine that would be the main matchup. And outside of that, not to simplify it too much, I'd say outside of that, then it'll be more, we'll just line up close enough to what we're set out at. But I'd imagine Mulcahy will take up Sice and just hear you, Neil, forget about your game and just keep Sice out of this. Because I can't imagine, the other alternative that would probably be committing Sean Kelly, or even they might, actually, to be honest, I forgot about Conor Corcoran there. They might, but that wouldn't be a good matchup. They might, I can't see them sacrificing Sean Kelly to there when they'll probably need him rampaging up the field and creating goal chances. Because one thing when you get to this time of year, as like Sean's saying about how little Corofin concede, and when you get this time of year, scorelines aren't going to be too big anyway. So like you'll probably need everyone that can get a score for you, and especially someone like Sean that can create a goal. You'll need to free them up as much as possible. So that'd be kind of my take on how they'll set up in the backs.
Is it Owen Kelly on Jack McCabe then?
Owen Kelly, Jack McCabe, probably. I'd say that would be the matchup that'll end up happening, but I'd imagine there will be no onus on Mulcahy. There'll probably be an onus on him to sacrifice his game completely, whereas I'd imagine Owen will be told, right, you're marking Jack McCabe, but you don't forget about you need to go up the field and create everything too. Like, but they have utilised Owen as an out and out cornerback this year for probably the first time ever.
Do you think this is something Moycullen are going to target to try and run these Corofin forwards?
I'd say naturally there'll be a certain element to that. That's because that is just the way Moycullen play. Like it's you get the ball in the full back line, you start the 3-man weave. You start the 3-man weave there, and you keep going till that 3-man weave ends up in the score. Like I'd say that'd be their natural. That'd be just naturally the way they play. And then I think possibly the other place they might target will, because they're such a tall team, is they'll definitely go for kick-out squeeze on Bernie. Now Bernard Paor's kickouts have been excellent to date, but I like Moycullen will definitely go for a high squeeze there just because they've the sheer height. They'll feel very, very well equipped to deal with any high or long ball that comes from a kickout.
With Moycullen as well, John, one big threat they have here is across the middle. Like if you look at the players they're possibly going to have the next day, James McLaughlin, Peter Cook, Tom Clark, Paul Kelly, like there's huge options there, and that's something Corofin are going to have to try and compete with here the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose even though I don't like it, kickouts have become such an important set piece in Gaelic football. That said, and I did mention it earlier, 2020 All-Ireland final against Kilconly, Bernie, Paor in goals. Like there was one kick out that he took where he kicked the ball out under the Hogan stand onto, I'm not sure who it was, but a Corofin defender that was running towards the opposition goal. So, obviously he's going to avoid them big lads. And I suppose the guy, again, we don't know whether he's going to be involved or not, but Ger Davern, he has a big role to play in we'd say kickouts, and Peter Cook as well. But I would say that they'll have some type of a plan. Whether they go short and run off the shoulder, they'll have some type of a plan. They're not going to kick the ball out to these guys. That's what they're not going to do. But just maybe you're going to ask this anyways. But in terms of matchups, I would suggest that the most dangerous Moycullen forward is obviously Desi Keneally, right? So Corofin have a man made for him in Liam Silk. So he's an absolute bonus to have back. He spent obviously most of his time since the Kerry All-Ireland final with Galway over in New Zealand. But he's a perfect matchup for Desi. And I think that you'll go a long ways towards beating Moycullen if you keep Desi quiet, because again, I'm just looking at his scores there. Like Moycullen have scored 995, right? And he scored 138 out of that. Now some of those have been from frees and that, like, so that's another area that Corofin have to be very good on and disciplined on, not to give away many frees in the scoring area. But I think Liam Silk is well capable of snuffing out Desi Keneally. So that would be a big plus for Corofin. I mean, you can look at this game from, it's kind of like a game of chess. There's certain things that Moycullen are good at and they'll try and do it. And there's other things that Corofin are good at. And, it's a case of who does more of what they're good at.
Something curve.
One matchup there, Paul, I thought about is they probably will target Tony Gill. I'd imagine, actually, now that I think of it. there will be someone detailed to Tony Gill again. Imagine, I trust Moycullen won't just say here Tony Gill is like the only thing you do today. They'll be told to play their own game, but I could see them shuffling maybe Dave Wynne across to Tony Gill. Just Dave be told to do what he's good at, get in his face, and don't let him get anything soft, and play your own game. But outside that, that would be where I'd see the matchups. Everywhere else, I'd see it as very much, as you are.
Will it be Cook versus McHugh?
Cook versus McHugh. Yeah, well, yeah, there'll definitely be someone detailed to Cook full-time man marking. So it probably would be McHugh. He'd be I know when we've played them, he's taken up kind of. Would they commit Kieran Malloy, or would the height be too much of a differential there?
Yeah, well, they're going to have Patrick Egan there, but they could bring numbers to midfield, knowing Moycullen.
Because I know when we play Corofin, they tend to give Malloy tends to go on Matthew straight away, as that's your tall scorer there you go. So I'd be just from that thought process, I'd be thinking it might be Kieran Malloy, but it could be McHugh, because he actually took up Matthew for a bit this year. So I'd imagine just I'm going on the similar thought process of the tall lad that can score.
Just on you mentioned Dylan McHugh there. I think he's probably the most improved footballer in Galway over the last 2 or 3 years. He was really missed by Galway this year. My guess is that he plays a very, very central role for Corofin. He gets the ball, he does the simple things right. And he's fairly forceful. Certainly he's a guy that, if you're Don Connellan, you're kind of saying, how can we kind of try and, nullify his threat. But there's there's lots of, especially in the middle third, potential matchups there, where both teams have, some really good footballers. You mentioned there, Patrick Egan. I mean, he really impressed me this year again, and I refer to the Connacht under-20 final against Sligo last April. He was excellent, just a rangy player. He gets up and down the pitch, and I suppose Pearse Stadium, if the game opens up, the pitch will suit I suppose both teams, because they like a bit of space. But certainly there's lots of potential matchups in the middle third.
I was just about to say it there as you were talking, lads. Corofin have to be prepared, Eddie, for it. It's going to be in corner forward, but they're nearly going to have to be prepared for this matchup. Michael Maughan is one of these players. He'll be given a job, whichever probably Moycullen see as the biggest threat coming
out field.
Yeah. He's just going to dog him for this game.
Yeah, and it's funny because if they commit Dylan McHugh, probably Cook, it probably maybe Kieran Malloy or something like that he'd be committed to, or even a Cogger. So it's it was very interesting seeing it against Mount Bellew in action. But the one thing I'd say, like we're talking matchups, one thing that's crossed my mind for the last 2 weeks is, would Moycullen chance a taller chap at the edge of the square?
You see what Colin Blake done? Is it?
Yeah, and not even with the intention, because I don't think if you play a certain way of football, which Moycullen's is hard running and hand passing, it's very hard. You can't really just show up at the final and decide we're going to play differently. But it would probably draw Liam Silk away from Desi Keneally, because I do feel in the Milltown game, when Mike Martin was in there and Liam Silk was on him, they were safe as a house. But once he was gone away from the square and out the field any bit, it was just that bit open. And I do wonder, if you put a tall lad in there, does that mean Liam Silk has to sacrifice and commit to the tall lad? And does that possibly open up other avenues for Moycullen? It's just something that's been crossing my mind now the last 2 weeks. As something that, like, if you watch the Milltown game, it was definitely where there was because Blake was outstanding there at the edge of the square.
That happens. You see them switching at it defensively.
I see that probably it's either it's either you revert Kermalai back to Tejas Square really, or you bring Liam Silk out across from Desi and Tejas Square. I think they're the two chaps who'll say that's the safest dealing with that scenario. So it's difficult. It's difficult to know, and I actually don't think Moycullen will, but it's something that I've in my head when I think about the match. I tell you whether that would be a clever move, like especially when you're Moycullen and you have plenty of tall players that could go in full forward. It's not like another club where you'd be putting a tall lad in there for the sake of putting in a tall guy.
Yeah, I know it's something they did try with James McLaughlin, 1 or 2 balls, but they didn't really do for much longer than that.
It's the one thing, if it's not in players' DNA to lift the head and look up and kick that long diagonal, it's just not there. They're not going to, you can't just turn around 2 weeks before a match and start doing it, but it might be just something to just engage maybe Liam Silk and free Desi Keneally maybe up a bit. That's the only thought process I'd have behind it.
And just on this, I know we touched on the Moycullen system earlier on, Sean, but like it's been Corofin's way when they get on the ball a couple of times, they will play that long ball. Do you see this as a big challenge, them having to maybe alter their style slightly now this weekend?
No, well, not like I suppose you'll do whatever it takes to win, won't you? We've all been used to watching, we'll say, the Corofin of maybe 3 or 4 years ago, play that just superb brand of football that was so easy on the eye. We'll say and I know, they're probably the one club in Galway where, from under 12, or not even under 12, but from under 6 up, the same style of football is taught, and you have certain foundation stones that every coach has to adhere to under the watchful eye of Frank Morris at underage level, and then and that feeds then through to the senior team. But that said, Corofin aren't going to. They'll only kick the ball if it's going to go to somebody else in yellow and green. So, sometimes you have to cut your cloth to measure. And, I don't think Corofin would have any problem in doing that. I think these young lads, way more so than when I was playing, and Eddie, you're younger than myself, but they're tactically very flexible. I mean, they can play it any way you want. So, you could have a situation, and we don't like watching games like this, but where, this lateral passing, just looking for the wee gap, and bringing the ball into the scoring zone, where there's very little kicking at all. You might have a game like that. I mean, without sort of castigating, but we all saw the Mayo Club final on Sunday. I think, what was it, 6 points to 4? Ballina don't care what sort of style they played, and I saw Ballina in the Mayo Championship earlier this year, and they can play a different style, but it took what it took to win the county final, and I don't think Corofin would have any qualms in I suppose I'm getting mental blockages now, but what's the word in I can think of the word in Irish but not in English, betraying their style, their DNA, to win the county final.
How do you see their approach, Eddie?
I'd agree with Sean there from the point of view, like when they played Kilconly, to be as pragmatic as they need to be. Like when they played Kilconly a few years ago, like they had to fight fire with fire. Kilconly set up with the blanket, and it wasn't, now Corofin didn't set up with a blanket, but they had to control the ball. And like we've played Corofin the last 2 years, fairly, probably last year very defensively, this year to an extent, like we set up well, whatever. They will work the ball till they see the gap. And like you do know when we have made an interception on them and the ball has possibly gone where it shouldn't, led by Gary Sice, there's an inquisition on the pitch to why that ball went where it shouldn't have gone. So Corofin won't won't put a ball where it shouldn't, and they'll be very careful with the possession. Possibly a bit more so than Moycullen. Moycullen are careful with the ball. It'll be all Moycullen predominantly 90% will be hand passing, but they'll have far more intent every time they run at you with it. Corofin, if needs be, will be a lot cagier in possession, and there'll be a lot more. They'll work back and over, waiting for the gaps. Moycullen possibly there'll be a bit more. Yeah, they'll run harder at Corofin when Corofin set up, and they'll try to create the gaps. There'll be a bit more forceful trying to create the gaps. Kind of Moycullen, you always get the belief that they're confident that even if you turn them over when they're running at them gaps, that they'll turn you over within the same moves. So there'll be a slight contrast, I suppose, with the intensity at which they attack a defence when it's set up. But I'd agree with Sean, it's not going to be high scoring. I'd say 11-9, a 1-8, something like that to win the game. I don't think it'll be as bad as Moycullen as the Mayo final, but I don't see it, especially this time of year. I don't see it going any higher than that. If you score 1-9, you're probably winning the game.
Sean, is it whoever wins more kickouts this weekend is winning, because both teams are going after the keepers this weekend, you feel?
Not so, and not like, you know, statistics sometimes don't paint. You know, it doesn't mean, you know, that whatever team is ahead on a certain stat that they're going to win. You could have, you know, we mentioned there earlier, Moycullen been fairly strong height wise out in the middle of the third, so Bernie Paor might, you know, be kicking short ones. So, you know, Corofin could end up having more kickouts, but, you know, they could get turned over. So I wouldn't say that. I would say that whichever team in possession makes better use of the ball, that's the team that is going to win. I think if you were to look at, you know, yeah, that would be for me where the winning and the losing of the game will be. When you're in possession of the ball, you know, how do you use it, right? Do you, you know, and if you give it back easily, you know, you're in trouble. You know, but kickouts are only a part of it. I wouldn't say, you know, it's kind of the be all and end all on Sunday.
You see them having a big part, Eddie?
To an extent, I feel Corofin will probably, ironically enough, possibly get their kickouts away a bit easier. I think Moycullen have an intense press on it, but Bernie is a great kickout, and I do think he will find gaps to get it away. Whereas I think the Moycullen kickout tends to be a bit left up in the air a bit. Now they do have a serious height advantage, and what they go for predominantly is a box four to win it. But I do think if it's not caught clean, like, and the one thing I've learned from playing against Corofin, they will devour the breaking ball. Like I said, Dylan McHugh, if they come in on a breaking ball, it's very, very hard to win it off them. So I think both sides will lose more kickouts than normal. So I probably don't think it's going to be as big a factor. Often in games, like if you turn over maybe 40% of the opposition kick out, you're nearly guaranteed to win. Whereas I think in this game you could end up 50% on your own kick out and still be in with a shout to win it. Because I just think, like, I think when you win the kick out, because it's going to be a slower game, you've still an awful lot to do to get that score. Whereas probably in the height of the summer probably matter a bit more, because if you win the kick out, you're probably nearly going to, like basketball, nearly going to get the score down the far side.
You've kind of said all throughout the podcast, lads, that it's going to be tight, it's going to be cagey, it's going to be tense, it's not going to be a classic this weekend. But who's winning Frank Fox and why this weekend, Sean?
Okay, so I've thought long and hard about this. I think Moycullen will win. I think they'll just about win. I think Corofin will give them an almighty test. I think Moycullen know this and they're ready for it. But in order for Moycullen to win, everybody's going to have to, you know, play at least a 7 out of 10. I think Sean Kelly, he's been, he hasn't played badly or anything like it, but I think there's another level in him. I think we have to see that on Sunday. I think as well, would say the quarter final and semi final in terms of preparation for the final has been good to Moycullen. A 1 point win in extra time, not in extra time, but in injury time against Salthill in the quarter final, and then a real tough battle against Montbellew-Moylach the last day. They're probably, apart from Corofin, the other two best teams in senior club football in Galway, whereas Corofin had Milltown and they had Tuam Stars, which was a tough enough game, I suppose, in the quarterfinal. But I think those quarterfinals and semi-finals will have benefited Moycullen more. So for me, Moycullen, just about. Corofin will give them an almighty test.
And Eddie?
I'd have to agree with that, to be honest. I think, and on a similar, when I was thinking about it, was something similar, is like Moycullen have played Salthill and have beaten Montbellew, and I know people have their questions about Montbellew because they're cagey enough in the group stages, but I think Montbellew had, the Michael Daly back in the pitch, Patrick Kelly had another game in them, and they gave it plenty of it. I think that's just a better run into the final. Now, the one thing I'd say is they were possibly lucky. There was a quick free that could have led to a goal chance delayed. So, like, they haven't been overly convincing in that quarter or semi. Whereas I suppose Corofin, it was tight against Tuam, but they were never, in my opinion, losing it. But it's hard to look past Moycullen. Just 1-15. Their age profile is probably that bit more established. No, I possibly do think Corofin have slightly more experience and better bench, but I just think Moycullen win 1-15. I think they'll win. I think it'll be 2 points in the end.
Yeah, this game really feels like it's going to go down to the wire this weekend between Corofin and Moycullen on Sunday in Pearse Stadium at 2:00. But that's all on part one of the show. We'll be now coming up with part two of the show of the intermediate preview. So join now in part two of the podcast to look at the intermediate final this Saturday in Tuam Stadium. It's between Kilconly and Monivea-Abbey. Kilconly obviously looking to go one step further than last year, and Monivea-Abbey looking to make the jump straight back up to senior. So a lot on the line for both clubs this weekend. Before we get into the action, Brian, I'm sure you have fond memories of Mark and Johnny.
Mark and Johnny is a nightmare. I mean, we've been marking each other since about 2007. And no matter what position or whatever place I go against Clonberne, it always lured me into the corner to him. So, being honest with you, I've had more sleepless nights over Johnny Ryan than a lot of players that I've marked in my time. So battles between Corofin and Clonberne have always been very, very tight. But I had that sickening feeling in my stomach every time I had to go playing them boys because I had to go marking him. And he got the better of me at times, and I hoped I put up a fight to him at times. But Johnny's one player when the retirement boots are on. I don't give a damn. I'll meet him for a pint, but I never want to see him at Junior C ever.
As I'd say, I turn around and say, Roache, he's a sickler lad to Mark. So in fairness, he's always turned on. That's the worst thing about a cornerback. He's always in your face, and even when the ball is up the far end of the pitch, the cornerback turned on, and you're just like, oh, this lad's here for the day, and that's that does get in a corner forward's head. So in fairness, we did have some battles. I can remember us scrapping a few times down the ground and that, but in fairness, 10 seconds later, we'll always be laughing at each other and give the dig again. So look, that's what you want. You don't want to be bad about it, but geez, we had some great battles, and hopefully one or two more. You're still going, I know you're going strong still.
Hey, if my wife hears me about playing football anymore, I'm divorced. Junior B next year.
Corofin, you'll never die, Corofin. You'll go again, no bother.
Plenty of pulling and dragging off the ball between you two. So,
oh yeah,
that's part of the game, and that's what I love about that, because you go playing these games against guys like for me, Johnny was an outstanding forward and probably one of the best club footballers. He won a brilliant All-Ireland. back in 7, wasn't it? Was it 7? 07?
7, yeah.
Yeah. So like we were bringing through forwards that time. Like when you think back when Johnny and them boys, Damien Rent and Michael Martin, all them boys, and Nicky, Michael Meehan, Sean Armstrong, we were winning under 20s, under 21s. We were winning minors. There was forwards coming out of the woodwork everywhere. Probably to the expense maybe of the 2000 say the 98 team and 2001 team. You know, there was such a big tranche of brilliant, exciting players coming through. Some players, like, you know, might have finished up playing in their late 20s because there was so many young players coming through. But Johnny and the guys were they've been the likes of Johnny's been keeping his club, you know, tipping away for years, like, and it will be a shame when all these players leave because, you know, they were household names for the last 15 years, you know. So
I'll good one there just comes to my mind. When we played each other championship this year, Roache, after about 5 minutes, you can't even start for your fucking old club, he goes, and I just back from holidays, wasn't starting the championship, and in he comes, bang. Yeah, so
listen,
beautiful, isn't it? That's the one. That's the one.
Sometimes you need to, you know, wait, you know, sometimes you have to.
I actually started laughing. I was in beside Donny Holler, and he was laughing, and we just looked at each other and said, "Oh, this is it, here. This is it."
Johnny, you've been.
I'm actually a bit embarrassed now, actually, when you say that stuff, because I don't believe off the field I could never see myself saying it, but on the field the demons come into me.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Johnny, you've been dipping your hand into a bit of coaching this year as well.
I have, yeah. With Menla there, they had time now, not that much, but with them as much as I can. So they're going well in junior. Bet Clonbur at the weekend, so that was a great win. Fairness, the boys had their homework done and everything, but Tuam next weekend, it's on before the senior final, so they got a nice fixture there. Tuam will be a different story though. I heard they've lots of good players and lots of senior standard players, like lads that have played and scored good scores for them in senior back in the day. So there'll be a different kettle of fish there. I'd say if the boys put it up to Tuam now, they'll be happy enough.
With that, with Menla, obviously they still represent going out in the provincial series at junior level, and this game against Tuam now decides whether they go up to intermediate or not.
Promotion, yeah, there's a promotion final, so it's 2 weeks' time. They're still in the Connacht playing St. Michael's. They're from North Roscommon. I don't know where it's on yet or anything, but yeah, they have that venture on out. It'll be good to see how that goes. I'd say they're good enough, St. Michael's too, but they bet Claregalway second team. But yeah, Menla, they're strong enough now, in fairness, and they have a great group there. There's 26 or 28 lads, you know, and they put the shoulder to the wheel. No matter what you tell them to do, they'll do it. So it's great to be involved like that and trying to start something new. Yeah, it's hard enough going into lads that'd be older than you and younger than you, you know, and trying to influence them. But it's an experience, so it is. Yeah, enjoying it.
And Brian, just on Corofin Shamrocks' year as a whole, get to a semi-final. So obviously it's tough in one way, I'd say, to look at the final this weekend. But overall, how do you assess the year?
Well, I suppose if you break it down into the certain parts. So if you break it down, you'd have the initial stage of the league where we were unlucky. We lost about 4 or 5 games by 1 point, being honest. They were, you know, it just seems we seem to have lost a few league games in the last 4 or 5 minutes of games. And I really mean that. Like there was actually a couple of games I think they were leading by a point, and we got sucker punched a couple of times with goals very late on. Losing Paul Varley then was a massive loss against Hereford. That was a huge loss because him in the middle of the field, I would rate him as the best player on the middle of the field at intermediate level when he's on song. So that was a huge loss. Championship came along then, and we got walloped against Micheál Brannock. So we didn't come out the box. We only scored 6 points. So at that stage, you were kind of going, this isn't looking good. But we kind of decided when we went down the pitch on the Wednesday night to kind of change around the way we were doing things a little bit, play Kilconly, put up a decent battle against Kilconly and scored, I think, 112 or 115, or something like that, I think it was, which was a lot better than 6 points. Then played Clonbur. Luckily, we got Joe Donovan home from Saudi Arabia. He helped us over the line against Clonbur. And then played Ormore, bet Ormore above Monivea-Abbey, and a real wet day, which was a great lift for a lot of the younger lads. And then we played Glenamaddie, which was a fantastic game in the stadium that went to extra time. And so if you go as far as there, you know, the league was unlucky, but it is what it is. We got relegated in that. And then when you go into the championship, yeah, there was some good moments in it. But the Monivea game, then you see, I suppose we've got a lot of young lads in the team, and the Monivea game exposed, I suppose, a lack of experience and also a lack of conditional experience as well in terms of the pace of that game, you know. So to be quite honest, and I'm not too sure what kind of a year we had in general. All I know is that I'm happy that I've seen a lot of young players get game time, and it will stand them, you know, and it's standing to Kilconly at the moment that they've got a few new young players in since the final, or the quarter final they lost against us in 2020. They've got a few young players through the door, like Davin and Sweeney and a few of these guys. It takes time to bring young players through. So, you know, you could have a decent year and you bring through no young lad, and you have a load of older players on, and you don't gain ground. So I'm hoping that by getting through these young guys, you know, in 12 months or 24 months time, it might make a difference.
You know? What was it like having Johnny Glynn this year?
Johnny is, I can't just, first of all, you know, straight away he knew everyone's names. He first names off by heart. He was in on every conversation in terms of tactics and his enthusiasm, and he wanted to meet everyone in the club. He is an absolute warrior. He's the kind of guy that you would, and I'd heard this from Cullen Callan before about him in the hurling. He's the guy that if you were going to war in the morning, you want him in the trench with you. The harder he gets, and it was against Glenamady in extra time. Like, you know, he dug in and he made some serious groundwork for us. So he's an inspirational guy in a lot of ways. You know, he's a real warrior, and I could see why, you know, the likes of Henry Shefflin would only be delighted to get this fella back home and get him in that camp. You know, part of the panel, even around the place, he's very infectious with his, you know, kind of appetite for hard work and honesty.
And for yourself this year, still going strong. Are you going to give it another year?
Well, like, you know, I always say that when people, you know, a couple of years ago, I was going, yeah, I'm finishing up now. But I love my physical running on the road. I love keep myself fairly fit, I suppose, the business I'm in. Just this year now, you know, a couple of niggles have come at me now. Calf injuries, a hamstring injury, a calf injury there for 6 weeks. You know, I haven't trained in 8 weeks before the Monivea game. I was rehab, slight running, setback, rehab. So, you know, when things like that start to come now, and also the kids are playing football, you know, and, you know, to give Marion a hand as well, you know, she's been brilliant looking after a lot of stuff, like, and then you have the business, and then there's the Offaly job and St. Mary's job, and, you know, things are very hectic at the moment. So let's just see how the new year comes, you know.
Johnny, then for Kilkerran, obviously, if you found yourselves in that dreaded relegation battle where no club wants to find themselves, you're obviously in a difficult group, but is it just relief to get out of that?
Just relief, yeah. I think we had a slow start. In fairness, we played Kilconly the first day. Could have beaten them, you know, we just weren't clicking at the time. Now, luckily enough, we got going at the end of the year. Yeah, it's an awful dogfight. Like, it's sickening going back training after you lose your third match, so you lose to Corofin, and you have to start back then 2 weeks' time to get a relegation. It's very hard, but in fairness, we are probably our most numbers training-wise was leading up to the first and second relegation matches, so we really pulled it together. Yeah, I'm happy enough to stay intermediate. Should we have been down there? Probably should have been, because we lost our 3 games. That's the big and the small of it, but happy enough to get the year over with and fresh start next year. Yeah, looking forward to intermediate, I know, at least.
And just on that, Johnny, like when you see Kilkerran and obviously Oncarua as well make the drop, like that probably just hits home how competitive this intermediate championship is.
Yeah, like Carrow come down from senior, no one really knew from North Galway or what a Carrow like, you know, playing against them and that. And even when we came up against them, we kind of knew with lads at the Kilkerran match, but starting off at the start of the year, when you Carrow will be strong, you know, and Kilkerran are, you know, when it comes to a battle, they're awful hard to beat. Like, we found out that ourselves, but it's just so surprising to especially see Carrow going from senior to junior in 2 years. Like, you know, now obviously immigration has hit them hard or whatever. I heard ridiculous amount of lads unavailable from last year and that, and same with Kilkerran. It's just just don't have the numbers there, it seems, in Killereardon. Like, you know, they have a few very classy players, but unfortunately you need the panel, like, you just don't have it. And junior, for them two lads, for them two teams, I know for a fact will be very hard to get out of next year, because you have Headford there who are very strong in junior, and then you have Athenry also who can pull it together, Banlaslow who can pull it together, and Minla could be there again next year. So, you know, it's still a dog fight down there, even though very surprised to see them two teams go down because they're strong enough. Like, yeah.
And why do you think you found yourselves there this year?
Just a slow start. Like Kilconly, if we beat Kilconly, we lost by maybe 2 points. I think it was, playing badly. We, like, our conversion rate, I'd say, was about 25% or something like that. We shot very badly. Poor our own team standards, it was poor, like, you know. But if you win that game, you're more than likely into the quarterfinal already. You have momentum, confidence grows and everything. So it's just a small little thing. Obviously we had a hard group, but I wouldn't, if we bet Kilconly, like, which we could have, we were nearly through, guaranteed to be through from one game. So that's how narrow it is. We've seen it. Kilconly 2 years ago, I think, were in the relegation final or semi-final. The next thing, this is their second final in a row, you know, intermediate. That's how tight it is. It's going to be the same again next year. No one knows. There's no favourite, really. You know, any team from 7 or 8 teams can win it. So that's just a slow start for ourselves. That's how we found ourselves in intermediate, in the relegation, I think, yeah.
On this final then, Saturday, lads, Monivea-Abbey take on Kilconly on Saturday in Tuam Stadium. Brian, what sort of game do you think we can expect between these two sides on Saturday?
If I had to describe, I suppose I've played against both teams this year. Kilconly, I suppose, with Norman's second year in charge, they have a good structure about them. You know, he's got a couple of years now training time with them. They would probably end up leaving maybe 3 up front. You know, Marsden, Mannion, if Marsden is playing, Mannion and Prendergast. And it's not that they play defensive, but they have a good structure in what they do when they lose the ball. Okay, so Monivea do drop their half forward line back in again, back towards their half back line, but not so much in a kind of the old school traditional drop 10 and 12 into the D and then counter attack. They drop them a little bit back, but it's more like a trick to get you sucked out of your defense. And if they turn over the ball, their mobility is fantastic. You know, I think they've possibly, they've very good half forward line, you know, especially Muldooney there, Keane Dolan, Lee Kenny, if he's in midfield coming at you. It will be a cage enough for fair, like, because if Kilconly might be favourites, but you have to, you know, it's incredible how close they are. And I was only doing this there along looking at the scores, like, they have conceded 12 points per their games, and Kilconly have 14 points conceded. And the scoring rate then, Kilconly have scored 16, and they have Monivea scored 15. So there's very, very little difference between the games. So there will be a case for, I feel, the scoring prowess of Kilconly, what they're scoring, especially with McDade being out. But I do think it's going to be a game where it could be cagey enough at the start. But at some point, this game is going to open up. At some point after 40 minutes, you know, this game is going to open up, and even your structure will slip a little bit. And something tells me, you know, that if Kilconly don't have the confidence and scores on the board at that stage, you know, it could open up to Monivea's advantage.
Hilly McDade's injury and his loss here, Johnny, it definitely plays a part in this final.
Oh, it has to, yeah. Like, inter-county, top class player playing in an intermediate final like that, you know, he's going to influence it so much. He's a massive loss for them, in fairness. Now, can they overcome it? I'd say they can, because they can definitely put up a performance. Not like one man, they're going to completely flop just because he's not there. I'd rather him there, all right, but I think they'll be able to work their team around that. They're still balanced enough. They still have enough good forwards, definitely, and enough good runners like himself, like to try and make up for his loss a tiny bit. Obviously, you can't make up for it all the way, but I do think that they'll be able to balance it out anyway. Hopefully, you'd be hoping for their own sake, because it's sickening for him as well. Like, you know, he's injury prone as it is, and just back going well again, and it happened again. I know he's well involved there. His father's involved as well. I think he'd love to be playing like there, so it's sickening for him. But I hope Monivea, I hope they don't lose just because of that reason, I know, but I don't think they would, no.
And Johnny, like there's similar styles with these two teams, but there's a few like key matchups. Monivea have 2 or 3 forwards that can really shoot the lights out, and it's similar when it comes to Kilconly as well.
Yeah, but I think the biggest matchup of the day, and it's massive, Trevor Mullins against Niall Daly. I was just thinking about it, Dennis. The Monivea tactic is long kick out, bang, right down the middle, try and even get over the half forward line, and then they're straight in on goal. It's like Trevor Mullins hit Trevor, he'll either break it off, catch it, and then likewise Kilconly kick out. I presume Monivea will be pressing up there, they'll be splitting. Tommy Mannion, he's going to be kicking it long to Niall Daly. It's going to be the main option. I think that's the biggest matchup of the day. Whoever wins that. Trevor Mullins is an absolute dog, so he is in the pitch. I've watched him. I've played against him. He can control a match, win and freeze, concede and freeze at the right time. He can win kickouts, primary ball. I think obviously Niall Daly is in with Galway then. He's good at going forward. He's all right at winning primary possession. I'd say Trevor Mullins is probably better than him in primary possession, but in general play, Niall is classier on the ball. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest matchups anyway. Then we have, obviously Paul Mannion. Then it's like that's all anyone's talking about. Who's going to mark Paul Mannion inside? He's going to be coming out around and Prendergast. So it sounds like this time last year. I know Kilconly were previewing them and they stopped the 2 boys, but I don't know who they're going to put on Paul Mannion, but possibly Caelan Mullery. I was thinking, he's a tight, sticky cornerback. He'll go everywhere. I'll just have the team here again. Just go through it once more. Finan Garvey as well, but he's a tiny bit smaller. I was thinking Caelan Mullery to man mark Paul Mannion going everywhere, because in fairness, Paul is flying. He got the 9 points the last day. That's the big one. Who can they stop Paul Mannion, really? Yeah.
Caelan Mullery and Finan Garvey, Brian, they really do seem like all year they've been the go-to Monivea-Abbey man markers.
Yeah, they will be too. They have a decision to make from who they're going to put on Paul. Like, I mean, Paul's not shooting the lights out in terms of from play. Like he's got 20 scores, he's got four from play, but he's winning a lot of ball. He's winning a lot of them frees. So if you're on Paul, he's going to take you on. He's going to bring you into a physical battle. He's going to put the head down and drive at you. So you need to have that physical strength and experience to be able to manage him in that way. He's a very, very good player. And he's a real leader of this team. He's been man of the match, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times this year. Prendergast then is a different, like this guy. Like this guy's got 4 goals this year. I think he got something like 5 something last year. Goals. Like this guy scores goals. If there's any break in your play and there's a quick counterattack from the middle of the field on, and he has any space, like so if Monivea are coming out and there's a turnover somewhere around the middle of the field, they get that first pass to Prendergast. If it's 1-on-1 or anything, he's in the back of the net. And I've seen that against us this year. It was very similar. This guy's a goal machine when he gets going. So I think they'll known, like I suppose with Michael Farrer involved there with Bunty Roache, like, and John Donlan as well helping. John and Michael will make sure that they have their homework done as much as possible in terms of matchups and also in terms of space that they will give. They will try and not allow them 2 boys to have space around them as much as possible in case Garvey, one of these guys, gets slipped by. So they'll be huge matchups. On the other side of the field, then you have the forward line for Monivea, and they've been smart in this too in terms of they've played a straight man spine at times when McDade was there, and it could be Brian Moran and it could be Phil McDonough, it could be any of them guys, Glenn Kelly in a spine. But against us, they changed it. Then they went in a 3-man for forward line, kept deep in, which created an awful lot of space for their guys to run into the D, and probably we fell into that trap a little bit as well. Johnny's dead right. Like, I mean, Niall Daly and Trevor are going to be crucial. And I saw it firsthand the last day. we came out, we scored the first 3 points of the second half, and you could feel it, just a little shift in momentum. You could feel a little shift in the players, and Monivea looking around going, Jesus, what's going on here? And he just gets this, he gets on the end of this ball and kicks it over the bar from 55 yards, 50 yards. It went as high as I've seen a score in Shoe in a long time. And it was like the father of the team going, hey, I'll kick this one over the bar. Everyone else settle down. Let's go back doing what we're doing. Like this guy, I mean, as Johnny was saying there, like Kilconny's kickouts will, Damon Concannon loves taking them short. Niall Daly loves getting them running to his right hand side. Donlan and Farrer will have looked at plenty of videos to know where to position, Trevor on their kickouts. They'll be smart enough, So I think Johnny probably knows Trevor better than me, but I'll tell you one thing: if there's again like Johnny Glynn and David Finnegan, these guys, when you're in the trenches, he's the guy you want in with you.
Do Monivea have a decision to make here, though? Because, like you talked there about Paul Mannion and Prendergast, and if Teddy Kerrigan could be one that's there, there's still uncertainty over Conor Marsden's fitness this weekend. So there'll definitely be 3 Kilconly forwards to keep up. Daniel Concannon will like to sit back in a sweeper role, and then the 2 Igos come from deep. Do Monivea have a decision to make, whether we go and follow these or whether we just sit back?
Well, they certainly have the mobility to follow them if they want to, but you like that young Davin now. He's kicked a couple of crucial scores in every game. I'm very impressed with him at the cornerback position. Conor Neal as well. Like Conor will attack, and there's times in these games like where you're going, you forwards now letting the guy off up the field, is that day is over. Like it's 15 up, 15 back at times. In terms of mobility. So they will have an option. Now McDade missing is a huge plus, like, because when he's in there, he's a giant of a man. And it's when he's not there now, it might give you a license to maybe go forward a bit more, knowing that he's not there. But again, as I said, if that ball breaks down around the middle of the field and the Kilconny guys are going forward, there's some serious pace. And Johnny was at the game the last day, and he'll tell you, like, because I was in the middle of it all, but I'm sure watching it, we got exposed so much around our middle 8. The pace of these guys. I mean, from Dolan Lee Kenny, Jimmy Muldooney, Brian Moran, what's the Niall Mannion. These guys were coming. These guys, especially Muldooney, like Muldooney just destroyed us coming at pace. So, you can sit and hold, or you can go out after your player. But if you turned over, that's where you fall into their strength.
Yeah, it's obvious for me that was a big game plan there of having the 3 lads inside against you in the semi-final. 3 lads inside and no one in until the sort of the midfield area. And anytime they won a ball, all they had to do was break the line. And next thing, it was near like a goal chance there, especially in the second half. Lee Kenny was right down the middle. Muldooney was very good. Keane Dolan cute in the ball. Paddy Mullins when he came on, just you could see it was something that they worked on. They were going right down from deep, break that line, and then 3 or 4 of them going, and they were very good at it. Like you said, they're very mobile, like, and they're young. The youth, they're very mobile, flying it forward. Like, there's not too many of them that are carrying a few pounds either. Like, they're absolutely all of them are going well, and you can see they definitely worked on that.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah, even on their own kick out.
Very similar when you're looking at them, Johnny, out there. It's like they're like flies around the place. They're very similar in their forward line. There's a lot of left footers out there. They're coming at pace at all angles.
It's a sign of good class. The left footer, you see, when they're that's what it is. All is good.
Just pop that one in there. They're very cute in their movement in the forward line. They run like. That's a very good tactic they did last day, like the 3-man for forward line, because a lot of teams, some
2 and 1, like, yeah.
The 2 or a spine, and what it does in the full back line is that if it's done appropriately, it does cause you concern, even if you have a +1 there. What area are you covering? Monivea can play this game, their running game, against anyone. It will work against anyone to an extent in terms of their tactics. It's what Kilconny do to counteract that. Okay, they play a sweeper. They might drop back Jonathan Mannion and say it could be one of their Neils, maybe if he's wing forward or whoever they want to play there, they might drop back someone there. But, it's the mobility was very impressive. But, you know, in saying that, you look at Kilconly's forwards are able to score, and this is their second county final, you know. So maybe they'll use that experience. The weather, it seems to be looking good and sunny for November day. So it should be a fairly decent enough dry sod. So it should be a good running game, you know, day for running, like.
Johnny, with McDade out, does Paul Flaherty automatically come in because they still had that long option in the square when they had Flaherty there the last day?
I think he does, yeah. Because in fairness, he looked all right. He was his runs were cute enough. Like, you know, he was starting in there and he didn't look that agile or anything. But next thing, when he started getting on a few balls, he did look good, and you could see that the football in him. Like, you know, he knew what to do. He wouldn't give it away. He knew how to make space. Got on some good balls. So I think it's an automatic, and it does make Kilconly think like, oh, this man is in here full forward. What are we going to do? And then if they do put one in front of them, next thing, if they do start with the three full forward line again, then you have Glenn Kelly one corner, you have Mannion the other corner. They're 1-on-1. Devin will probably pick up. I'd say he'll pick up Glenn Kelly probably. And then you have Mannion that might expose a weakness. You know, you've Kilconly sitting. Yeah, they'll sit their one back there, probably in front of right in the D, because it seems to be what they're doing, just right there. And then it's kind of is inviting Monivea on. You know, Monivea, if they play that cute enough, which as you said, the management team there, they're very experienced, you know, and I'd say Mike is a great lad to have in with them because he knows exactly what's going on now club-wise. So I think Kilconly will have to put someone in front of Paul there, and then it kind of helps Monivea to push up and to dominate the game a tiny bit more on midfield.
On Kilconly's side of things, does last year be referenced much this week, do you feel, Brian?
Well, you know, just because you made the final last year doesn't mean that it's going to be your turn. And if you're thinking like that, you're in for your mindset isn't there. Last year is gone in the story, so this year is a total new game. There is parts though when you have that in the bag that you don't get as excited about the small things leading up to a final. And in the game itself, you know, they will use that experience of last year. I mean, they just didn't seem to get going last year against Moor. It was a very, very wet day. As far as I remember, I think it was. Yeah, and they didn't seem to get going that game, and Moor, in fairness, pulled it through. But I think they will have I think it'll suit, you know, there's some young players there it'll definitely help them from last year. They're more steadier. They seem to be a lot more steadier, I feel, in some aspects of the play. They're winning the games. You know, they just have that Prendergast, like, in fairness to him. And even like Connor's brother, young O'Neill, Ryan O'Neill, got man of the match the last day, full forward. You know, that's an unsung situation. One of the worries is, and I didn't know how he did the last day, David didn't score the last day, you know, and they are relying on Paul a lot. So even when McDade went off the last day and Welch came in, Welch came in full forward, isn't it?
Paul Flaherty.
Paul Flaherty, sorry. It seemed to actually didn't change them. It didn't change the way they were actually doing. In fact, you know, the game plan was very similar, whether McDade or Flaherty was in there. It was very similar, very fluid what they were doing. You know, I'm wondering if Kilconly, if Paul isn't getting the supply of ball that he wishes to get, you know, how will that go down then? You know, and if Trevor is getting parity with Niall Daly, how is that going to work? That's when you fall back. Then you see when your top player up front isn't, you know, maybe when he's really marked heavily, you want your nucleus of your team and the field then to maybe carry the ball through the hands, through the lines, and work it up closer to get other guys in the scores. And you know, and Kilconly surely can do that as well. They definitely can. Like, they can come at different angles and do that. And in fairness to Jonathan Mannion, a few of these, they do come, and, you know, Teddy Kerrigan is as cute as any Kerrigan, you know, that ever played the game. But maybe Monivea might be better at that moment, you know.
For Kilconly, Johnny, is it about, if they're to win this, getting more scores out of players other than Prendergast or Paul Mannion this weekend?
There's on mute there. No, short answer. It's not going to happen. Like, you know, it's being realistic. You're not going to get a corner forward that's going to kick 2-2 that has never done it before, you know, especially in the big day. Like, I can't see it. You really do need Paul Mannion to kick his 8 or 9 points, 6 of them from frees, and you need Prendergast maybe hitting 2-1 or 2-2. Niall Daly to kick a couple of points. That's what it is like, you know, because I've seen them play before, and when they're even attacking, they don't even shoot. They look for Paul on the loop, or they look for Prendergast, that hard run right down the middle or right off the shoulder, you know. He'll go for the goal, but anyone else, they won't really shoot. And that's their game plan, you know. Get it to the two boys. So they'll be sticking with that. And it really does come down to the two boys. But sure, look, it's a lovely position to be in for them, you know, trying to win an intermediate for their club, like, you know. So I'm sure they're relishing it. I know Paul is. I don't know Prendergast as well, but Paul has been there time and time again, so he'll be looking for that ball every time, and he'll be shooting, you know. So yeah, you won't see a random corner forward scoring 2-2, and if you do, don't come back to
me. Just before we get into final predictions, lads, I was putting it to Mark Brosnan last week on the podcast. Do you still feel that there's a place for Paul Mannion on the Galway Senior Football panel for 2024?
I'd say not. Just what the boys are thinking. I'd say they're looking at getting the younger lads in. Definitely Prendergast. Like Paul Mannion against Prendergast, I'd be saying Paul is the better player, like, you know. But just the way they'd be looking at things, and I know they're getting a development panel in place, and we're looking for 22 or 23 lads, all in their early 20s or whatever, and trying to develop 4 or 5 or 6 lads from that and get them onto the senior panel. That's the way they're kind of looking, I'd say. So unfortunately, I'd say his time is gone, you know, and it's probably a sickener for him, but I'd say that's the way they're looking at it, the senior lads, you know, the county boys.
And how do you see it, Brian?
Well, I have a great time for Paul. Again, a guy that I've had great battles with, and I text him, wished him best of luck there lately. And I'd love to see him back in a Galway jersey. But I'd say if you speak to Paul himself, you know, the chances are slim enough when they're, you know, when county teams are looking now at developments and bringing in players, as Johnny said, into development squads and S&C and long-term athletic development plans. Maybe Connor, or maybe, you know, they've moved on a little bit from that, and they'll be looking at the likes of the young Prendergast, or, you know, these players coming through. I'd love to see him win a championship, being honest with you. I my wife is from Kilconly, and I have to give a shout out there to Kilconly. I'd like to see them win it. And I'd like to see Paul Mannion go up the steps, because he's put in a lot of good battles for Kilconly over the years. But as regards Galway, I think that day could be gone from the way Pauric like might be looking, you know. But again, sure, look, hey, I'm only a corner back talking about corner forwards going to go. Like, I mean, who am I to talk about that? Like, but from an outside looking in, I'd say Paul is really focused in his club now, and if he won this and they got a run in Connacht, I'd say he'd have the best time of his life, and it'd be the most important time of his life.
So final predictions, coming to you first, Johnny. Who's going to win and why?
Monivea, because Trevor Mullins is going to win the midfield battle, and I'd say they're going to run in a couple of goals. That's what they seem to be working on all year, and they're very good at it. Like what Brian said there, I'd love for Paul Mannion to kick 12 or 14 points, and it'd be great for him. But no, I'm calling Monivea, win the midfield battle and win. I'd say score a couple of goals, which would be massive the day of the final. Yeah.
And over to you, Brian.
Okay, well, I suppose, you know, Monivea should never have come down from senior from the start. Okay, they got sucked into that last year, and they came down, and they should never have come down. Kilconly are in their second year now, second county final intermediate level, so there's very little difference in that regards. McDay being out, you know, versus the scoring prowess of Kilconly versus the running game of Monivea. As I said, I'd love Kilconly to actually win it. Due to connections there, and I'd love them to win it. There's two sides, and I'm not going to sit in the fence as Johnny's thought I would sit.
I told you he'd sit in the fence.
No, I will. No, I will. I'll nail it. I think that if Kilconly get off to a very good start and get the scores on the board and they get a rhythm in the game, I think Kilconly will win it. I genuinely do. However, there's a part to me that, having played against both teams, and I can only give my experience of it, I felt the pace of Monivea was just something that I haven't felt at intermediate level. And that's with McDade gone off the field. And I think with that, there's a very good chance actually this is going to go to extra time. But I think that Monivea-Abbey will pull through in the end. So, as much as my heart would like Kilconly to win it, and my head and my tired legs are telling me that Monivea-Abbey will see it through just about, because the scoring charts are very, very similar.
Yeah, it really feels already like there's going to be nothing between these two sides at the weekend on Saturday in Tuam Stadium. But that's all we do have time for on our intermediate preview for today. A huge game awaits, but thanks a million to the lads for coming on.
Boys.